All right, quickly seeing if my ears were still working. Good afternoon, everyone. Or good morning, I think, for some of you. I think for you, Estella, it's, by the way, still good morning.
Just about morning, yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to today's webinar. It's a 30-minute webinar, so it's a short one where we are going to talk about culture fit versus culture add. I think everyone has heard of the sentence, great minds think alike. Well, we actually think that great minds do not always think alike, but that's something that we are going to touch upon today. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Charlotte. I am one of the founders of Equalture, which is an HR tech company based in the Netherlands. Basically, what we do is we develop games that candidates play at the very start of the application process to allow companies to base their first impression on scientific insights rather than gut feeling. And I brought Estella with me today. So Estella, you of course much better in introducing yourself than me introducing you. So I would say take the floor.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Hi, I'm Estella Reed. I'm currently head of people at Distributed. Distributed are a fast scaling, people first, I will say, tech startup. We kind of emphasize the fact that we're actually a people business in the technology space. We are part of a new category of talent workforce provider. So we're sort of championing the way in something that's known as private talent clouds. So what we do is we provide corporate enterprise businesses that are in need of sort of top-notch, flexible tech talent with teams of very highly skilled freelance developers. And we exist as well to really champion the new approach. So the way that people are now approaching flexible careers and freelance careers, especially in the tech space.
It must be different for you though, now that I'm thinking about it, because we know each other, of course, as you've been working with our platform with some previous companies as well. But to shift away from a maybe a product company like we are to a company where people is also the core of your business, and then being head of people for that business.
Yes, I mean, we have you have to consider not just your internal core team, but actually how we're delivering externally.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, without going into too much detail, we're looking at how, as you know, we're actually out front now. We're working with Equalture, partnering with Equalture to help us with our hiring, and we're rolling that out both internally and looking at how that might be something that we can do externally as well.
Nice. Hey, and today we are going to talk about culture fit versus culture add. I think it's for me it's an interesting topic because I think that in the UK the topic started living maybe also a little bit earlier than it did in the Netherlands. But I think definitely, let's say a year, maybe 2 years ago, the topic culture add all of a sudden started to sort of arise. If you would have to explain the difference between culture fit and culture add, how would you explain that to me?
Okay, so culture fit essentially is hiring people that are like you, hiring people that think like you. We all have bias. We all have, as human beings, an instinct to kind of like have a gut instinct. So when you meet somebody or you speak to somebody, if they look like you or they seem like you or they like you, it's something about that makes it, I think, more accessible. There's an element there perhaps of an kind of an instinctive trust perhaps or comfort that you get from that. So culture fit is where you basically, you seek to hire people that are like you or like the team that you currently have. Culture add is slightly different. So culture add is hiring people that aren't necessarily like you, but that are going to add to your culture. So actually it's more about adding diversity to the team that you have currently.
Yeah. I, by the way, forgot to mention that there is a chat functionality where you can ask questions to Estella or to me. I'm sorry. I try to always be organized when these webinars start, and I always end up in a complete chaos. But that's clear. Thanks. Why do you think that the conversation about culture add all of a sudden became so much more apparent and visible for people compared to maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago?
That's a great question. I think so the whole piece around company culture is something that I think we've all, people that are professionals that are in this space, have kind of really seen come to light in maybe the last 10, 15 years. There's the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That kind of when we first started talking about company culture. And initially, I think culture fit is more accessible. Again, a lot of companies have core values, mission, vision statements. So your core values are essentially the core behaviors that you feel as a business lead you to success. So the core behaviors that you look to see in your core team, but also the core behaviors that you want to emanate and that you want to share with your clients and customers that you believe help you, achieve success and create a positive working environment. It's easier to hire for culture fit. What I think has happened in the last 10 years, and this is my humble opinion, is that there's been a bigger light now cast on the area of diversity and inclusion, or diversity, inclusion and belonging. And the reason for that, I think, is apart from the fact that, on the whole, as a world, we've kind of become much smaller in many ways, and communication and technology has led us to have access to every people, things, ideas from all around the world, which we didn't have before. And there's been a recognition of the fact that diversity actually is something that having diverse thought allows for better problem solving, for example. And if you're in companies where you're, for example, I focus in technology in the startup space, so innovation is a really big thing, and diversity ultimately is something that really enables innovation and progress. Because ultimately, when you've got people in a room that all think differently, you've got lots of different perspectives as to how you might approach a problem. So that's why I think in recent years there's been an acknowledgement, and again, I sound biased to this because I work in tech and I work in tech startups specifically, that actually you should be aiming for culture add if you're in an environment where you want to see you're looking for progress and kind of continuous improvement. That's not to say that one is right and one is wrong, culture fit or culture add. It's purely, what are your circumstances as a business or a company? What are you trying to achieve? And what are your goals? And working out which of those is most appropriate.
Yeah. And we are going to talk about your approach to hiring for culture add in a bit, but you just touched upon something that I always find a very interesting topic: company values, your mission statement, your vision statement. We are now here at Equalture, we're with 40 people, and we have that discussion now a bit more, like, should we write down our company values? For me personally, writing down your company values is some sort of, then you almost mentally need to stick to that concept of culture fit, because then you're going to translate your values into behaviors, you're going to look for that specific behaviors when you're going to hire. So what do you then think of the whole concept of writing down your company values?
Now that is probably a topic for like a whole week to debate. So, we as a business, we are approaching around the 70 mark now, and we are looking at putting in place, or we've been undergoing a program to sort of discover and work out what our company values are, or we're about to articulate those. Again, there's no exact science on this, and it's not black and white. You can have company values and then enforce them and expect people to, stick to them rigidly. And yes, values can be there you can use values as a change agent. If you're not happy with where you are as a business, you can use your values to change the direction, to change behaviors, values are there to align people. That's not to say that the jury's out on this. I think you can have values. I think people can have core values, but maintain cognitive diversity. I think there are sort of fundamental examples in life of, this is a bit controversial, but religion, for example. Religions have values, but then the people that uphold those values and are part of those, follow those religions are scattered across the globe. So I think you can have core values, but still have diversity of thought and diversity, across your team.
Yeah, and I think maybe an example is that well, you obviously know that for the people that don't know Equalture, we started the company really with the aim to ensure equal opportunities in the labor market. So each and every employee working for Equalture is head over heels with the concept of diversity, inclusion, equality, and equity, by the way. So I think that we are trying to phrase company values a bit more towards what is well, then it's almost more, are you aligned with the vision and the mission and not necessarily the company values. But I do see that struggle that you're having. I think we're in the middle of that right now. Do you think that every company is always ready to move away from culture fit and going to culture ed? Because we had a brief discussion, of course, before we started the webinar today. It is signing up for a little bit more complexity, I think, if you're aiming for culture ed.
100%. I think across the whole journey. So culture fit, starting from hiring, it's easier to hire for culture fit. Once you've hired somebody and they're in seat or they're part of your team, it's then easier to manage a team, I think, of people where you've got a very strong cultural alignment and culture fit. Again, it comes back to that, having people that are sort of similar to you. The thing about hiring for culture ad is you need to be very intentional about it. And it's, I think you have to be okay about being uncomfortable. You have to agree that you know that you're going to have a team of people that are a bit disparate, and there might be moments where things rub slightly, because that's what you're looking for. You're saying that you want different perspectives. You want people to come to the table with different ideas and different viewpoints. So maybe, agreeing, if you've got a culture where originally you did everything by consensus, you might have to think about changing that. It's about making sure, if you have cultural ad, you have to make sure that you really do have sort of safe space for people to be able to view their different opinions, because there's no point in saying that you're going to hire for cultural ads but then not have an environment internally where those differing views can be aired. So really, two things: you need to decide about how uncomfortable you're prepared to be, and there's an element of risk in that, so your attitude to risk, but also I'll say like conflict, and I don't mean out and out fighting, but there will be, again, people like to use the phrase creative conflict, and that's where often the best ideas are born. But that, I think largely it's just, again, it's about being intentional and deciding that's where you want to be, and having that agreement from sort of leadership down, and then communicating that.
Yeah, and that ties really well in with a question that Peter is now just asking. Do you have any suggestions on how you can convince the management of a company to move a bit more towards culture ed?
Yeah, you can start with, initially there are plenty of academic reports, just to begin with, if you want sort of data that show, there are stats out there, and I know that boards often like to see, people like data-made decisions. I think there's that, and I think, like I said, if you have an element of, if in a business you are looking specifically to innovate, and you're not looking to just flatline and maintain a status quo, then it's so scientifically proven that the best way to do that is to have diversity in a team. And you can maybe looking at, one way of doing things is looking perhaps at your current environment. If there are areas where you're stuck as a business, where you're trying to solve a problem that you can't solve and you can't move past, my suggestion might be that the problem is that everyone's looking at it through the same lens. So it's that kind of cognitive blindness, I think, or groupthink. Groupthink is, and the buzzwords, groupthink, echo chambers, but it's a true fact. It's a known thing that if you've got everyone that thinks the same way looking at problems, then you're never going to come up with a different solution. So I think thinking about those concepts and then applying that, looking around at where you're at as a business, and then again considering having a plan. So it's like saying, look, we want to move to culture ad, this is why, and giving the reasons, and then saying, in order to do that, these are, again, the steps you need to take. Give the changes you'd need to make in a hiring process, and then what you might need to do environmentally in terms of your company culture in the team to then be able to embrace people that come in, you know, with who are more, you know, have got cognitive diversity.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that hiring for culture ed is maybe the next step that we are taking towards diversity? I hate the term diversity hiring, but you know what I mean. Like, I think that diversity was for a long time focused on demographics. Isn't culture ed just some sort of a progressed step of diversity, but then more on the cognitive and behavioral side of the spectrum?
I guess it is. I mean, cognitive diversity is less visible. So again, it's that thing, you know, D&I has become a little bit, it can feel a bit like it's a box ticking exercise, because it's something that, you know, it's hot topic now, and everyone knows it's the right thing to do. And also, you know, it's a bit like, if you're not doing it, then it's not a good look. But actually, if you're looking at, I mean, the thing about D&I, that's more about just, you know, being inclusive. It's giving everybody a fair shot and not having bias. Cognitive diversity is less visible and it's much harder, but actually, kind of my view is, if you're hiring for cognitive diversity, almost the other diversity falls in, because that's what you're removing that whole tranche of bias already, like in one step.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to the word intentional. I think, you know, if you just take some time to think about what it is as a business you're trying to achieve, not just in terms of your, you know, well, both in terms of your actual business objectives, and you can be, you know, data driven about saying, this is what we're trying to achieve, these are the roles and the skills and the competencies we need, and then hire objectively to that, then kind of everything tends to kind of wrap in without being contrived, which I think is perhaps what you're getting at there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hey, so the question that everyone then always asks, culture ed sounds cool. I think we should move towards it, but how are we going to do that in the hiring process? You do have some experience with it. Could you walk us through the process of hiring within maybe distributed or previous companies that you worked for that applied that culture ed component to the hiring process, how that works for you?
Sure. I mean, we haven't set out to say we are going to hire with culture ed in mind, but what we've set out to do is say we want to hire to make sure that we're as inclusive as possible and that we're hiring the best people for the roles. But in that we're making sure that the opportunity is, the opportunities aren't biased in terms of how we're setting them, and that the process allows for people to make objective decisions. And I think data-based decision making underpins a lot of what we do. So we've just undergone an iteration here at Distributed in our hiring process, which actually starts with how roles are required, funnily enough. So again, it's right from the outset, making sure that we have clarity around, hiring managers have real clarity around what it is they're looking for and what they need.
Oh, I see that Estella, I think, left the screen for a second. Let me see if maybe your internet connection got disrupted. It's still live webinars. These things can always happen. And we got Estella back.
Sorry, I think I had some odd forced, someone signed in, I think. Very odd. I'm back. Anyway, sorry. I'll
no worries.
So yeah, so it begins actually with the role. For us, it's with the kind of role request process for role. So hiring managers, the way we built it is that hiring managers are very clear about what they're hiring for, in terms of the role, the competencies and the skills, and that we have consistency throughout the hiring process. So in terms of scorecards, and that includes practical tests, but it also includes rolling out Equalture very early on. So Equalture obviously gives us that element of the ability to really use data from a neuroscientific perspective early on in the hiring process. And coupled with that, it's training.
Oh, and Estella left again. I don't know, Kat, I think you can hear me. You're not on stage, but maybe you could quickly see what is going wrong. In the meantime, to maybe touch upon what Estella was saying, here you are again. No worries. I was just touching upon what you were saying about the clarity around what you're looking for, because this is indeed something that we see a lot with our customers, that if they start working with our platform, they've like those job criteria or competency models, or whatever you'd like to call it, that are like 10 years old, and they keep just using it for the same position over and over and over again. And I think that's the complete opposite indeed of culture ed. But having your back, I will give it over to you again.
No, I mean, it's absolutely that, because again, speaking from somebody that works in scaling startups, those are fast moving companies. The environment is fast changing, and we have to remember that the companies are they're like, they're living, breathing organisms. Every time you hire somebody, your business changes, your culture changes incrementally. So yes, in terms of the hiring process, we are very mindful that we pay attention to, we have the specifics for each role. So I think aside from the actual, building out a hiring process that allows for the consistency and the clarity, we also make sure that we spend time with hiring managers in coaching them through that. And I guess, I will keep coming back to the use of the word intentional, which I'm sure sounds really boring, but it's easy to forget to be intentional when you've got a million things going at once, and when, as a hiring manager, you're balancing perhaps big workloads, and then on top of that you're trying to hire. It can all of the details and the nuance can get lost. So in terms of what we're doing in our hiring process to address the issue of cultural ad, we have a very solid, like a really solid cast iron, rigid hiring process, which then gives us the ability, and it gives our team the ability to have that fluidity around how they perceive people in terms of the candidate process. But also the things I think to remember these days is it's not about, hiring is different now. It's not us interviewing people and grilling them, and the dynamic has changed. Like, hiring now is a two-way conversation. Candidates are as much interviewing us, really, and the opportunity here, as we are them. So I think that's something that's really important to bear in mind.
Yeah, and it really makes sense, the comments you are making with regards to the hiring manager as well, because I think that a lot of companies sometimes tend to, there was Estella going again. I think that this is actually something on our side and not on Estella's side, but maybe to finish my sentence. Yeah, here we go. I think, Estella, this is a problem on our side, by the way, and not on your side. But oftentimes I see that that people forget about the hiring manager a little bit in the equation. Like, hiring manager is super busy, they need to open a role, they just need to deliver a template, and that's it. While it's actually, of course, if the hiring manager is not on board and doesn't get the urgency of diversity in skills, diversity of behavior, etc., and eventually the hiring manager is going to make the decision here. So I think the hiring manager is a very highly underestimated component in this strategy to move towards culture ed.
One thing that we've had a real push on here, and we've had the real luxury to be able to do it, is we have just undergone a period of time where we have automated everything that we can possibly automate. Our processes, we've taken everything to pieces, and we basically approached it like we're building a machine. Now, that serves us well in terms of not just the fact that we're a remote company, and so for us, being asynchronous is really important. It removes human error, but it also removes the need for us to hold a lot in our short-term memory. It gives us a lot more space to actually think a bit more deeply, and to be really human about what we're doing. So that's something that, it's a little bit off topic here, but I think it's something worth talking about, because I'm sure people are, really interested in how, you know, you optimize a hiring process. How do you build a hiring process and, you know, allow time and space for hiring managers to be able to think more and give your people team or your talent team time to be able to coach your hiring managers. Well, if you can clear a lot of the admin, if you can clear a lot of the things that actually you can use a computer, that like a computer, a robot, AI, whatever you want to call it, you know, should be doing, and let the humans do the bits that they're really good at, then it helps, you know, it will help you achieve that that optimum around, you know, hiring either best fit, if that's what you're going for cultural fit, or for culture add.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Laura was asking the question, and I think you did answer it already, but maybe to summarize, because she asked, what is the ideal hiring process in your opinion? Let's say that if you would have to mention 3 things that you think everyone should always do in a hiring process, what would it be for you then?
Gosh.
Sorry, I'm really putting you on the spot now.
Oh man, that's hard. Well, I think the first thing I would say is, firstly, approach your hiring process. Right, as a talent person, first thing would be, you've got 2 stakeholders in this process: the business or your hiring manager and your candidate. So as a talent person, you need to look at everything you're doing in that process through those 2 lenses. That would be my first, like, top tip. Secondly, start at the beginning with clarity. So work with your hiring manager and have the clarity around what the role is, and then work with them to devise what the process should look like. And then I think have consistency. Make sure that you build consistency into the process for that role specifically, but ideally, if you can, consistency across all of your roles. If you're hiring for culture fit, you know, stick very rigidly to values questions. If you're looking for culture add, you can still put values questions in there, but you just need to tweak. But I wouldn't say that, I mean, yeah, I would have those 3 considerations in mind, and just make sure, you know, there's a balance there between having the right number of steps, that you both have enough diligence on each side, a candidate and from a hiring perspective, but not too many steps that you're going to lose really good candidates and that you're assuming that you can take up too much of somebody's time in a hiring process. I'm not sure how helpful that is, but I think if you come back to those...
For me, it was very helpful. And for Laura as well, because she says thank you. Hey, maybe one last question from Alex that I saw coming in. It's maybe slightly off topic, but I do think it's a very nice question, so I wanted to ask you anyway. He's saying we are moving away from D&I to diversity, equality, belonging, and inclusion. I think I also see that more and more often. I also see more and more companies, by the way, moving away from equality to equity. But he's saying, do you think it's just a new hype? Or do you consider it linked to be companies getting more and more mature in the concept of D&I and then move towards that step?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, anybody can look at things with a slightly cynical view and say it's new hype. Like, there's always going to be that. And there will always be an element of that, for sure. But then you need that to make the change. I think it's better to be talking about it and hyping it than not doing it, because society, things take a long time to change, right? None of this stuff is going to happen overnight. We've got to make a start. Agreed, though. I mean, we have included belonging. I mean, in our program right now. So diversity and inclusion is kind of the beginning. It's that first bit of people. It's easy to access, right? Diversity and inclusion. But belonging, I think if you don't include belonging in that now, then you can't really achieve to diversity and inclusion, because people need to feel like they belong. If you go out and hire lots of people based on diversity, but when they come into a business, they don't feel welcome, or you've not set things up so that people belong, then they're not going to stay. And again, I think equality and equity is a different one, because it's very hard to treat everybody the same and give everyone the same opportunity, because if you give... Sorry, that's a difference. Equality is very hard to achieve. Equity, making sure that you give everybody the opportunity to be able to achieve the same level, is different. And we know that because with equity, everyone comes from is starting at different points with whatever it is. I think that we will see more of a move towards that. I think I always like the idea of sort of equating where we are with people and culture to kind of a bit of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of thing. And I think we're gradually moving up that pyramid. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we're seeing with the whole, a lot of companies now I'm seeing are certainly diversity, inclusion and belonging, if not diversity, equality, inclusion and belonging, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. My very last question, I'm sorry, Kat, I do see you were about to round off, but I do wanted to ask the last question, and then I will leave everyone to have a nice lunch. To what extent would a company be able to implement hiring for culture ads without having crystal clear insights into your team? Because from the moment you want to add to your culture, you should have some sense about the status quo of the team, right?
Yeah, I think, you always need to know what your starting point is, I think, before you start making changes, because otherwise, quite simply, you just end up with chaos, and I think if you want to have culture ads, you need to be mindful of, who you have in the team currently, how people behave, what the inclinations are. And hiring these days, especially, I will say with tools like Equalture, you can kind of do precision hiring. You can look at what you have currently in your team and say, we know we're really strong in terms of people who are really quick thinking, or people who are, I'm trying to think, are slightly more inclined to take risks. But what we could really do with a few more people who are structured, because now the business requires that, or we've realized that where we're not doing so well as a business is because we're lacking in that skill, or in that approach, that type of thinking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really important to have a barometer of where you are culturally before you start thinking about making any big changes or undertaking something new.
So a clear starting point, clarity on what you need, and a consistent process. That's 100%. The foundation then.
Yeah, and then communicating that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, having that said, I took 2 minutes too long of your time, so I'm sorry for that.
Absolutely.
I really love to have you here today, and very much looking forward, by the way, to meeting you in real life finally after all those COVID years. I hope you also enjoyed to be here. If anyone who's still here still has any questions from Estella that we did not manage to answer, we are both active on LinkedIn, so I think you can both find us. So always feel free to reach out. You will get the recording, by the way, of this webinar also afterwards. So if you forget about some interesting parts, then you can always watch it back later. And to you, Estella, a big thanks for being here today. I really enjoyed it.
Absolute pleasure, Charlotte. And it's such a fascinating topic. And, I think we could talk forever. And, little plug again for Equalture. Folks, if you're not using it, absolutely, I can have a go. Just even if you go to Equalture and check out the platform and the games, everybody that I know that's been involved and has certainly played the games has learned something new about themselves and can really see the value. Secondly, little plug here for a book I'm currently reading that if any of you people geeks are out there and haven't seen it before, Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. So this is all about power of thinking differently. Also highly recommended. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, Charlotte. Thank you for inviting me. Can't wait to meet you next week. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in and listened.
Cool. Thanks, Estella. And thanks everyone for listening today. And hope to see you soon on our next webinar. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.